Module 3a. Delivering services for youth who have been sex trafficked or commercially sexually exploited or are at risk to be. How trauma affects trafficked and exploited youth. As we begin Module 3, we will hear from an expert who will explain what trauma is and how trauma affects youth who have experienced commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. She will also help you understand what trauma-informed care and trauma treatment may look like in residential settings for sex trafficked, commercially sexually exploited, and at-risk youth.
Celia Williamson, University of Toledo.
I am excited to be here today to talk to you and thank you for doing the work that you are doing with young people. I want to talk to you today about trauma, because trauma is what you will see as you do your work with these young people every day. Trauma happens with a lot of people. It's very common. Trauma is what happens when you have a car accident or when you have something that psychologically or emotionally or physically overwhelms the system. Then you suffer from trauma. Now, there are different types of trauma. There's an acute trauma, like what happens when you have a car accident and you react and you respond. But then later on, you might have some effects from that car accident. Maybe you don't sleep so well at night, or maybe you have symptoms. There's also chronic trauma, something that continues to happen. Just trauma happens over and over again. And then there's what we call complex trauma. And that's really different types of trauma. So there may be trauma from abuse, physical abuse, or domestic violence. There might have been emotional violence in a child's past. There could be neglect. Someone's belly that was hungry all night is stressful and can cause trauma. So trauma can come from lots of different ways. A death in the family, loss, all of the things that can cause someone to be disturbed by that. And so there's acute trauma, chronic trauma, complex trauma, and trauma really affects a lot of our lives. And so we're learning much more about trauma as we go, but that's what the research talks about in terms of trauma. When you experience trauma, and trauma is in the eye of the beholder, so it's not our place to say, well, you only experienced this, so you really shouldn't have suffered trauma. People can suffer trauma over really small things or really big things. Now, when this person becomes disturbed by their trauma for a period of time, they can actually suffer what we diagnose as post-traumatic stress disorder. And it is a diagnosis. And when someone has post-traumatic stress disorder, it really affects almost every aspect of their life in terms of their ability to have a healthy relationship, their ability to have good friendships, their ability to work a job, their ability to even emotionally regulate themselves. Their response sometimes seems way out of line, and it's a response that's coming from trauma. And so there are lots of symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, from sleep disturbances to reactions or overreactions to things, and sometimes things that we see as maybe non-compliant behaviors or behaviors that disturb us, or maybe we think this young person is acting out or being bad, and we attach those reasons to other things that have to do with their character, and sometimes it's because they have suffered trauma. And when we understand trauma, we can understand a lot about young people's behavior. Because young people, boys, girls, transgender youth, because they've been experiencing violence, whether it's physical violence, whether it's control, whether it's force, they have certain effects from the events and the things that they experience. We call those the 3 E's: the event, the effects, and the experience. And so because they have suffered control and force and maybe manipulation or physical violence, certainly emotional violence, then they're more likely or at high risk to suffer post-traumatic stress disorder or to have had traumatic experiences, and not just from the trafficking experience that they might have had, but these youth may have been vulnerable for a very long time. So they may have suffered previous rapes or victimization or domestic violence or childhood abuses. And so they may have suffered chronic trauma and complex trauma over time. So they really deserve our care and our support and our knowledge about trauma, because once we understand what trauma does and how it affects young people and how they display it, then our approach to them is going to be trauma informed. I think the best thing that we can do for young people is really understand trauma and approach them with a trauma informed lens, and also get them to trauma treatment. And so those are two different things. And I'm sure you heard something about trauma-informed care, but trauma-informed care really means that everything we do, from the policies we have, to the ways that we approach young people, to the communication, to understanding their behavior and their motivation and why they acted a certain way. All we're doing is we're putting on our trauma-informed lens and we're saying, could this be trauma? And once we understand that, then we start to change our language. We start to change our approach. You know, running up on a young person can be very triggering if somebody's had trauma where someone has physically been violent with them. So running up on them could be triggering. But if we know that, if we recognize that, we can say, I'm not going to run up to somebody because that brings energy into it and I could trigger them. Or I'm not going to stand in front of the door and block it just because I want to protect them. My intentions may be good, but just blocking a door and not allowing a young person to leave could be triggering, particularly if they've been held by force by someone. So understanding trauma-informed care is critical in the way we build relationship. You know, some of us, we've come from the old school and we want to keep it real and we want to keep it 100. And so we're going to be harsh and tough because these kids need to learn. And all we're doing is triggering trauma. I think we can keep it 100, we can be real, but we can be real in our caring, our love, and our support, and our understanding of trauma, because yelling at someone or keeping it real or being tough and harsh is oftentimes just re-triggering. The other thing is getting young people to a trauma treatment therapist. Okay, trauma-informed care is the way we are going to respond to them. But that's not going to resolve trauma. That's just going to help young people not to be triggered. What helps them is to get them to an actual trauma treatment therapist. And what I like to say is I don't like to get my young people to a therapist who says they understand trauma. I like to get young people to an actual trauma treatment therapist. That's somebody that has had special training or certification, and they use a model. There are lots of models, CPT, EMDR, lots of models, but they specify a particular model that they use that is effective because these are evidence-based models. And so when you want to do the best by young people, get them to the most qualified and the best person. So everything you do should be trauma-informed. And part of that is getting them to great trauma treatment therapists. Trauma-informed care has elements of empowerment and choice and voice. And that's very critical to young people who are trying to find their way. So instead of control, maybe guidance. Choice is always a part of it. Even if you have a program where you say, would you like to have peas or green beans for lunch or dinner? That is a choice. You're giving young people a choice. Or if you don't even have it like that, you can say, would you like to have green beans or not have green beans? I mean, it comes down to those small daily interactions of giving them power and choice and guiding them in how to make decisions for themselves. And that includes being involved in trauma treatment. If a young person is not ready or says, I don't want to do this, then we can still guide, we can still give them choice and empower them and love and care for them. And we can still operate in a very trauma-informed manner and let them guide, let them lead part of what's going to happen in their lives. And when they're ready, perhaps they want to go to trauma treatment. Perhaps they don't. But part of it is not controlling, not forcing, not coercing, because that's often an experience they came from. This experience should be one about love and care, concern, power, choice, voice, and all of those things as you guide them down the path into adulthood and into hopefully a healthier trajectory. Thank you so much for allowing me this time to share with you. And if you ever want any more information on sex trafficking or trauma work or anything in relation to that, you can join me at the Emancipation Nation podcast. It's free. I bring on experts every week. And you can also join the Emancipation Nation Network. There are 900 anti-trafficking advocates there, and you can get all kinds of free and continually updated information so that you can keep your skills fresh and you can keep growing yourself and just gaining all of the knowledge that you need to have to be able to work with young people and continue to be inspired to do the excellent work that you're doing.
Apply what you've learned. To help you gain skill using what you've learned, try out your new knowledge on these examples. You will have half a minute to write down your responses to the question. If you need more time, please pause the program while you write your responses. Example 1. Jonah gets angry and lashes out or becomes tearful during free time every day. All the other residents are laughing, talking, doing art projects, and listening to music. One of the staff notices that Jonah becomes upset when a particular popular song plays. What are some things you might want to pay attention to or do in response? Here are some things you might pay attention to or do. Recognize Jonah may be responding to his own trauma. The song could be a reminder of an event or time period. Give Jonah choices about his response, such as leave the room, change the song to something he picks, talk with a staff member, or do something else he identifies.
Building trust with youth. Now, based on that understanding of trauma, we are going to talk about service delivery in residential placement settings. The first step to providing services to help trafficked, exploited, or at-risk young people is to earn their trust. You won't be able to successfully guide and care for them if they don't trust you. To begin, it's important for youth to have autonomy and choice when entering into a new residential setting. For youth who have been trafficked or have experienced commercial sexual exploitation, they haven't had choice and control over what has happened to them. Allowing them autonomy can happen before the intake process by talking with them about the residential setting, what to expect during the intake process, and the services that are offered. Then answer any questions they may have. In some types of programs and in emergency situations, these early steps may not be possible. During the intake process, it is best practice to allow the youth choice and autonomy to the greatest extent possible. For example, let the youth pick the room where they would like to complete the intake process and paperwork, and the chair they want to use. Creating these small moments of autonomy and choice can begin the building of trust with the staff and the program. Many youth enter residential care with a history of not trusting adults or being harmed by adults. It often takes time for them to develop trust with those working in a residential program. When you first meet a youth, it is important to focus on building a trusting relationship. Try to find ways to partner with this young person, and remember that youth are the experts on their own life. One important way to build trust is by being transparent about the requirements you have as a mandated reporter. When staff members talk to youth about the communication they will have, staff should clearly explain how informed consent works and how it will be used during their care. You should also explain what information about them may and may not be shared with other people.
Voices of Safe Harbor, Words of Youth and Survivors of Sexual Exploitation in Minnesota.
When dealing with youth about this stuff, don't pressure them. Don't make them tell you in a specific amount of time. Give them their time.
Let them know you are there for them, and they'll open up over time. That's how you learn how to help them.
How to support youth who have disclosed sex trafficking or exploitation. Services in the program should not be conditioned on young people disclosing trafficking or exploitation to you. You can support a youth and provide resources without disclosure. Be aware that many youth do not identify as victims or survivors of sex trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation, even if they have experienced it. Often, disclosure of trafficking and exploitation may be gradual and could happen a long time after the abuse occurred. If a youth discloses past or present sex trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation, there are important steps you can take. Your specific response will vary depending on your role within the program and your relationship with the youth. Keep in mind that it is not the program staff's responsibility to fully interview the youth. Building a safe connection with the youth, understanding their triggers, and supporting their current needs is the priority in a residential placement setting. You need to understand that disclosing trafficking or exploitation may make youth feel unsafe or vulnerable. This may trigger a trauma, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, which may appear as defiance, aggressive behavior, refusal to participate in programming, attempts to leave the program, and running away. You should ask the youth what safety issues or worries they have now that they have disclosed. Work with the youth on a safety plan to help alleviate those worries. You also need to determine if there's a need for medical care, such as an exam by a sexual assault nurse examiner, sexually transmitted infection testing, treatment of injuries from an assault, or other follow-up care or services related to the trafficking or exploitation.
Voices of Safe Harbor, Words of Youth and Survivors of Sexual Exploitation in Minnesota.
Don't push too much. If they don't know how to share yet, don't try to get a lot out of them.
Don't be intimidating. Don't keep asking kids question after question. Ease into the conversation. Most people get uncomfortable and won't talk anymore. Sometimes it's better to do a project and ask questions through the project. It's fun too.
Safety planning for youth. Whether or not a youth has disclosed sex trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation to staff, safety planning with the youth should begin at intake and be ongoing while the youth is in the program. Safety plans should be individualized and developed in partnership with the youth. The plan can be created informally and verbally, or it can be written in a more formal process. Either way, the youth should have access to their safety plan. When possible, safety plans should be completed in partnership with the youth's caregiver and other supports, like a safe harbor advocate. There may be times that a youth does not have family or a caregiver locally. This might happen when the youth is under guardianship of the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Services, is a ward of a tribe, is a foreign national, or is a youth from out of state. This may require collaboration with the youth's county or tribal caseworker when doing safety planning. Keep in mind that many youth have different ideas of what safety means to them and how they can keep themselves safe. Also, youth may not consider themselves as victims of trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation. This may make it more challenging to create a safety plan that addresses the needs of the youth both in the program and when they leave the program. For more information on safety planning and considerations, please visit the Minnesota Department of Human Services Safe Harbor website for a safety plan template and further guidance.
Voices of Safe Harbor, words of youth and survivors of sexual exploitation in Minnesota.
Staff should be friendly, open-minded, helpful, serious about their jobs, but friendly enough to relate to clients.
Spend time with them. Make them feel like they're included, like they're part of the family. Keep talking with them in a friend way. When something bad happens, they trust you enough to tell you.